Be in order. Members, you now have before you the free conference committee report on Senate Bill 423. What is your pleasure, Senator Essman?
Mr. Chairman, I move that when this committee does rise and report, it do concur in the free conference committee amendments to Senate Bill 423.
Senator Essman.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I want to briefly go through what has occurred with this bill in free conference committee. The Senate Bill 423, as it left the Senate, emerged quite differently from the House. The Senate version of 423 basically established as those earlier spreadsheets showed, a licensing system for growers and distributors and couriers, prohibited storefronts. The House version did not have any licensing provisions within it, and basically went to what could be known as the compassionate model, and that is either the registered card holder provides for themselves, or the registered card holder has a provider that assists them. In free conference committee, we reviewed both the bills, and interestingly, just on the 14th of April, the U.S. attorneys in the state of Washington provided a written opinion to Governor Gregoire in the state of Washington concerning a bill that had been passed by the Washington legislature that set up a licensing system for growers, dispensaries, and manufacturers. The U.S. Attorney, and a copy of that letter is on your desk. Inadvertently, page 2 of that was left out in the packet that was handed out prior to our Easter break, but it should be on your desk this morning. I apologize for that error. But that U.S. Attorney's office said that licensing regime was, they would, in their opinion, violate the Federal Controlled Substances Act law and potentially subject state employees engaged in the licensing activities to prosecution. So the bill that is before you with respect to what comes out of the Free Conference Committee does the following things. Number one, it uses the definitions and descriptions that were in the Senate version of the bill with respect to debilitating medical conditions. A change was negotiated with respect to how to handle severe chronic pain patients. The Free Conference Committee adopted language that was proposed by the Board of Medical Examiners. You can see that on page 2, lines 23 and 24, or basically lines 23 through 26. I'll try again, 23 through 29 of the bill. That sets up kind of a two-stage approach toward severe chronic pain diagnosis. A severe chronic pain diagnosis that comes from a single physician that is able to obtain objective proof of the causation of that pain through a diagnostic test. That single physician can provide a certification. If for some reason, and there are certain medical conditions that objective proof is difficult to obtain through diagnostic tests, if that situation is present, that patient can still acquire a certification if that patient undergoes a review by a second physician who confirms the diagnosis. And as described in the language suggested by the Board of Medical Examiners, severe chronic pain, as you will see on lines 23 and 24, is now described as pain that is persistent pain of severe intensity that significantly interferes with daily activities as documented by the patient's treating physician. So that's the standard there. With respect to what I'll refer to as the distribution model, the bill as it emerges from the Free Conference Committee provides that the registered cardholder can provide for themselves and are limited to 4 mature plants and 12 seedlings as described in the bill, or they can nominate a provider to assist them, and that provider can either grow it at the registered cardholder's home or at their own facility. That a provider is limited to a maximum of helping 3 people, one of which may be the provider himself or herself. So at no location should there be more than 12 mature plants if there are, in fact, 3 registered cardholder patients being assisted. It sets up a local government authority to prohibit storefronts, provides for inspections of the registered premises, which locations do need to be disclosed to both the Department of Public Health and Human Services and local law enforcement jurisdictions. Provides for inspection of those registered premises. Prohibits advertising, which is and promotion of marijuana. Provides for a hotline that people that suspect abuse with respect to the program can report. And it establishes the Children, Families, Health, and Human Services Interim Committee as the oversight committee for this program going forward. So those are that's the high points on what's in this bill. I'll be happy to respond to questions. Thank you very much.
Is there discussion on the motion? Senator Blewett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I applaud the members of the Senate and House who spent a lot more time than I have on this bill, and the majority leader has spent the better half of the last month. I think he slept during that time working on this bill. And I think 80% of it's great. But there's one problem there's 2 problems that are major problems to me that are going to prevent me from voting in the green light on this. This is referred to as the compassionate business model. Well, it strikes me as the Soviet business model, because the providers who are supposedly to be the source for the stage 4 cancer patient who can't grow his or her own medical marijuana has to rely upon the goodwill of a third party to spend the time, energy, resources, infrastructure, and business equipment to provide a product that they can't charge for. That doesn't sound very American. That doesn't sound very capitalistic. That doesn't sound like any other drug that I've ever heard of in the United States of America. We're not saying to pharmaceutical companies, give the Percocet out for free because you're a compassionate provider. I think what we're doing is setting up increased criminality through this compassionate system, because I just don't see how that's actually going to play out. We're going to have people, stage 4 cancer patients, saying, I can't grow my own. Then you go to this person who's supposedly going to do it for free, and that person is going to probably do some backsheesh under the table payment for medical marijuana. I think that's setting up a decentralized, unregulated medical marijuana system, the exact same thing we're trying to prevent here. The other problem I have is we don't have any provision in this bill that I saw that deals with the issue of laboratories. We have increased the science, improved the drugs that can be created from cannabis, and I don't see any exception for that. And as a result, the product's going to fail, and the people that depend upon this and the revised drugs, improved drugs, and the increased technology that's being developed with respect to cannabis is going to suffer as a result of this bill. I think we can fix this. I hope we can get it to the governor for an amendatory veto, because I do want to support this, and there is a lot of good stuff in here, and there has been a lot of hard work, and both parties have come together, and we're almost there. I just don't think we're quite there yet, and I hope by the end of this session we can get there, because the voters want us to act, and we need to act.
Further discussion on the motion. Senator Larsen.
Chairman, members of the Senate, I rise in opposition to this bill, and I do so reluctantly, dragging my feet. And to open, I would like to say that I have developed great respect for the two members of the subcommittee I served on. As the minority member of that committee, I was treated with great respect, and I like to think that our effort was collegial, and I think it was productive in many ways. I believe that this bill has some good qualities, and the intentions are clearly positive, because what we have in our marketplace out across Montana right now is not what most of us want, I'm sure. Whether you happen to be a grower in this marketplace, whether you happen to be a consumer, whether you sell products to those growers. In the final analysis, though, for me, what this came down to was thinking of an 81-year-old lady that I happen to know who has been using medical marijuana for a number of years. A very private person. If you met her on the street, you would never pick her out of the crowd as someone who uses medical marijuana. I know that she has come to vaporize and not smoke or use edible sources of marijuana. But this product works for her, and she has a multitude of physical ailments, including glaucoma, and is a cancer survivor, among other problems. Her concern characterizes what I think is going to happen to a lot of people out in our communities. She doesn't have a connection to multiple growers. She only knows one person who happened to, I think, meet her through a church group, in fact, ironically. But she has been connected to the same grower for some time, and she's learned that the grower is no longer going to produce, and she really doesn't have a way of connecting to a new producer. There will be no registry in this law if it's enacted according to this bill, so people will have trouble if they have a sole source of supply actually finding someone who might in fact be that very compassionate provider who is planning to grow on behalf of people at no charge. So this brings me to my second point. There is no commercialism involved in this bill. There is a reference to helping an individual grower set up their initial operation, but nothing for their time or other expenses that would be involved over the course of time in growing these products. That's important to me. It's also important that we have some of the regulatory features of this bill, which I do respect, and that is law enforcement needs a way of determining how, when, and to what extent they can enforce federal law versus state law versus what the communities themselves really want for their citizens. So in the final analysis, I don't think this is an open enough system to really help the people that I think are out there who really, truly are benefiting from medical marijuana. I'm not concerned about the casual people who smoke marijuana on the street corners near the bars at football games and so on in some braggadocio fashion, because that's appalling to me, and that's not the purpose of the initiative that was created and signed. I signed it in 2004, thinking that it would benefit a certain population of people, and I still believe that it will, but I don't think this bill is the vehicle to do that. So reluctantly, I oppose the bill, and I believe that each of you has to follow your own conscience and vote how you choose. But again, I would pay my respects to the members of the committee. We read every single iteration of this bill, and there were many of them, I can tell you, through the Gray bill. The staff that worked on this, Sue O'Connell in particular, really worked yeoman's hours to get this to us. And I don't think it's a terrible bill. I just don't think it's the bill that will really benefit the people that I'm concerned about out in the community. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on the motion? Senator Wanzenreed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. A question to the sponsor of the bill.
Sponsor yield.
I will, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Wanzenreed.
Senator Espin, can you help me understand if I have a relative that goes through the process and the doctor and the subsequent visits and then a second opinion renders them eligible, how will they find a person who will grow medical marijuana for them if they are unable to do it themselves? I just got an email this morning about a woman who's in her 90s is being cared for by her son and daughter-in-law who are in their 70s and they're in bad health. So how would, on the new date of this bill, how would that person be able to identify a person that would be a compassionate grower for them, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Wanzenreed, this bill does not set up a system for that. The initiative that the voters passed in 2004 also did not set up a system for that. This bill preserves the system that was presented in the initiative in 2004, and it was silent with respect to how people would obtain a provider. So from that standpoint, and frankly, the House very much resisted the concept of legitimizing a commercial system.
Further question, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, continue to yield.
I do.
Senator Wanzenreed.
Senator Espin, can you help me understand then how many people will be eligible under this system? The fiscal note we had for the bill as it left the Senate indicated about 2,000. The inference that's being made through this new clamped down version indicates that there would be fewer than that. Can you give the committee some idea as to the number of people that would be eligible going forward for the kind of compassionate care that's anticipated in this particular proposal now, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Wanzenreed, I want to thank you for the question. And this bill, as it comes to you today, relies very strongly on the good judgment of Montana physicians and the Board of Medical Examiners with respect to patient diagnosis, patient referral, and patient certification. And frankly, it will depend upon the good judgment of the doctors in this state and the Board of Medical Examiners in their job of observing and ensuring that Montana physicians follow an appropriate standard of care. So that number could be higher or it could be lower. Any number that anybody would express would be a conjecture.
Further question, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, continue to yield.
Yes, I will.
Senator Wanzenreed.
So is this it? Is this the version of the revisions that are necessary to faithfully implement the will of the voters in 2004? The reason I'm asking is because when the bill left here under the model that you described that we've now abandoned, that was it. And now we have a different model with, I think, severe restrictions based on the bill itself having an investigation of a physician who prescribes more than X number of patients. And I'm wondering, is that what the voters want now? Am I to be led to understand that this is it? We're sure that this is what the voters want, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Wanzenreed, I think this bill goes a long way toward addressing what I heard when I was going door to door talking to voters in my district who were frankly outraged at the presence of a storefront operation 1 block from a middle school in my district. I think they were outraged with the traveling caravans that were crossing the state. They were outraged with certifications being given over over the internet by the use of Skype and telemedicine. This bill addresses those specific problems. With respect to the compensation model, most of the expenses are of a nature that the registered card holder could assume those if the product is being grown at their home. The pre-conference committee wrestled with the issue of compensation, but the presence of compensation, how to define what is reasonable, frankly, that is what led to the traveling caravans and the storefronts, etc., that so many people in our communities found objectionable. Will this be the last time the legislature addresses the provision of marijuana for patients in this state? I very much doubt it. You know, so I assume it is. Do we pass a certain bill with respect to tax law or eminent domain or whatever the subject is, and then never come back and address it again? No, we always come back and address those issues. That's why we're here every 2 years. We're here to respond to evolving issues that the community wants us to address.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to speak to the bill and thank the sponsor for his comments. We haven't corrected something that people told me was the concern, that is how patients do connect with producers. And I would argue that the way that the bill is written now, it will encourage a flourishing black market. There's no question that there's lots more restrictions in what we have in front of us. And the real issue seems to be is not one that we're here to make changes, but we've had significant changes in the bill since it left here. The assurances were given that we didn't want to amend the bill at the time because that wasn't the will of the voters. Went to the House, had one hearing, that was the public input. It came back and we rejected those amendments, and then it went to a conference committee where the bill was rewritten substantially. One of the concerns that we ought to ask ourselves is, should laws enacted by the voters stand a higher test here, or should we simply say that's just another law? We can amend it any way we see. And this session, I think, if there's been a rule about carrying with those laws in any different way, we've abandoned that. So this model that we have in front of us is consistent with the pattern that's been set this session. The voters have spoken once, in some cases twice. That's not good enough. We have an opportunity to do this right. And the sponsor himself said, well, we're going to retain parts of the existing system. None of us were proud of the fact that we had traveling caravans and Skype examinations. That is something we clearly don't want. But this bill goes way beyond that. Those people that are now eligible, the question would be, they're in the system in a registry that safeguards and provides confidential information. We're repealing that section. That section is repealed in this. What happens to them? People that become eligible under this system have to be fingerprinted. How many times have you had to go to the doctor and be fingerprinted for prescriptions for narcotics? At all? That's in the bill for medical marijuana. Law enforcement seems to me, if there's any question about examining whether or not there's access to see if someone's in violation, this bill opens up a door, I think, provides a lot of latitude for law enforcement to make entries without, I think, warrants, if you read the way the bill is written. This is a significant change, not from last session, not from 2004 alone, but from a month ago when this bill was here on the 6th, when we had the same debate. Let's be careful about what we're doing here. There are thousands of people out there that are going to be affected by this, and the sponsor himself said, well, I have no idea. It's up to the physicians to decide. It's an expensive system that's in play here, one that very few people can afford that actually benefit from these substances. And the letter that was handed out, without attribution, I might add, indicates may and could and would. Same letter was sent to New Mexico 3 years ago. Not one public official who's been involved in a system there that's much like the one that we had as the bill left here has been prosecuted. The governor of Washington asked specifically for the answer that was given here. What are the feds going to say? No, we're going to ignore it for Washington State and enforce it everywhere else. Of course they're going to say what the letter says. And I'm sure if our governor sent a letter, he'd get the same response as well. We need to take a very careful look at this system that we have and not be stampeded. It's late. Everybody says this is the best we can do. It's good enough for now. And I would submit to you that the system we have here is no better. The proposed system is no better than the system we have for those people out there that are truly in need. And we should not force them to make a choice becoming felons because they can't afford the multiple examinations that are required, or going cold turkey and leaving a fraction of the lives they have now. We shouldn't put them in that position, and that's exactly what this proposal does.
Is there further discussion on the motion? Senator Erickson.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just speak to the bill, and I'll try to speak to the bill through the words of some of the many emails we've all been getting. I know we've read them, but I want them in the public record. I hope that you have had a chance to look at the one that we just got today about the 94-year-old mother and the 70-year-old folks who have no idea how they would begin to grow medical marijuana. That's a good one. Here's some more. In my experience, when a person has a debilitating condition, especially cancer, they are not in a position to grow the medicine for themselves, nor is their family and close friends. It is very time-consuming and emotionally taxing to care for someone in this condition, and I don't think they would be able to grow medical marijuana and provide the care their family member requires. I was in that position. This is a woman, by the way, from Belgrade, Montana. I was in that position as primary caregiver for my mom when she had cancer. It took everything I had and then some just to make it through each day. So that's the problem of being able to get the medicine. Here's one from a woman in Hamilton. When I was thrown from my horse last year and broke my pelvis, it took one doctor to write me a prescription for 50 Duolidad tablets, an addictive painkiller with a high street value. I would be willing to bet that he wrote more than 15 such prescriptions last year without being investigated. It is absurd to require investigation of doctors who make too many medical marijuana recommendations when no such restraints are in place for far more dangerous pain medications. I read that one because a lot of people are angry, and that's an angry one, but angry with good reason, because we suddenly have a bill which says a doctor can only have 15 patients to whom medical marijuana might make sense. Here's one from Frenchtown. I personally have been able to return to work, and I'm very fearful that the changes in the law will make it cost prohibitive to get a card and difficult to obtain the medication. And then I don't have the knowledge to safely grow my own or turn it into a usable product. Again, that's Frenchtown. Billings. Who will be my caregiver? I don't know how to grow my medicine. And I certainly can't afford to buy all the items that I have read are required for growing medicine. I am scared about my medical privacy, and this bill shares my medical condition with people whom I definitely choose not to share my medical condition with. It's another part of the bill, right? This is going to be a law that's going to have people widely known out there that they're using medical marijuana. I can get duffel. Here's one from a man in Wilsell. And that's one of the interesting things about this. It's Wilsell, it's Broadus, it's Reed Point, it's every major city. It's all over this state where people are being helped, and helped well. I can get duffel bags full of narcotic pain medications and 90-second appointments from just about any doc in Montana. I am officially, totally, and permanently disabled by chronic pain. It'd be very hard and expensive for me to achieve the legal status for getting this medical marijuana, because you need a couple of doctors or you need more data than he has available. Here's one from Cameron, Montana, another small town. Finding a reliable provider for medical cannabis is no easy task. And when you do find one that treats you with respect and dignity, professionalism, and quality medicine, you may not be able to designate that provider as your own because they already have their maximum patients allowed, 3. So what's going to happen to the people who have the chance to work with some others and suddenly discover, oh, I've already got my 3 patients? Here's one. This is the only one that actually comes from one of my constituents, and it's an interesting one because there are certainly a number of people who've written from Missoula. But when they've written from Missoula, as I look at their addresses, they're mostly apartment dwellers. And that's one of the problems that I have been concerned with for some time, how apartment dwellers are going to be able to grow their own. This one happens to be someone who lives in a home. But he says this: this cobbled together mess of extreme and arbitrary restrictions is being referred to publicly as the black market bill, and the Mexican cartels must be delighted. The meth dealers and hard drug pushers will have a field day. The losers are Montanans, especially suffering patients who are turned into felons or condemned to permanent pain or opioid use, which kills scores of people. Drummond, Montana. We don't want to take the narcotics that can damage our livers and kidneys or get us so addicted that it eventually kills us. Here's another one now from Fairfield, Montana. I'm a 64-year-old cancer patient, hold a medical marijuana card. It helps me with pain, appetite, and sleep. Saves me $150 a month on prescription drugs that could become addictive. If this law passes, you will make me a criminal. This is one that's a person that I've been in contact with for some time, back and forth from Billings. And he's a person who has multiple sclerosis and uses tincture for his post-shot nausea and smoking to stop the tremors. But with the bill that you have now, you can't do both. And so his choice is going to be to become a criminal again. I myself know the effects. This is from Nikki in Billings. I myself know the effects of pharmaceutical drugs and the damage they did to my sanity and life for 4 months when my physicians kept prescribing me more and more and stronger doses. Had I not stopped and refused to take them, I would be dead today. There was a letter in the Missoulian on Sunday. It's from a woman that almost anybody in Missoula would know. She's been an incredible athlete. She's in her 70s now. She used to do marathon runs, and she ended up with a rare autoimmune system illness. She was drugged and drugged and drugged. She finally found medical marijuana. She's back having a life. Her last sentence is, "At this time, I don't know yet what the outcome of the legislative bills deciding the fate of people like me will be. Will I be a criminal or will I get pot legally? I have no alternative because I will not go back to opiates." And finally, the last one I'll read. This one from Big Fork. I no longer have to make sure that I have enough Lortab, Cymbalta, Celebrex, Ambien, Flexeril, and many others I can't even remember. I removed all those chemicals from my body, and I will die of pain before I have to take them again. Members of the body, we ought not put forth a bill that's causing that sort of pain to so many people.
Senator Jent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Senate, I want to talk about a couple of things today. First, I want to also thank the subcommittee. This had to be hard and difficult and contentious work. I rise today to speak about the rule of law. This republic, not just this state, but all 50 states, this entire republic, was founded on the crazy idea that people could govern themselves without the aid of a king, but by the rule of law instead. It just so happens, and I want to say this because my opposition to medical marijuana is based solely on that. In all 50 states, it is illegal to distribute marijuana, to grow marijuana, to sell marijuana, to use the telephone to talk about doing those things, to conspire, confederate, or agree with others to do so, to do it within 1,000 yards of a schoolyard, and to take the profits or proceeds from such illegal activity and either plow it back into the operation or put them someplace. That's money laundering. There are a host of other spin-off crimes, but those are the main ones that are indicted in federal court, where I serve as a member of the Criminal Justice Act panel and defend these cases. And by the way, I did not distribute this sheet. I only got the second page of it, but those are on there if you're so inclined to look. What the subcommittee, or excuse me, the conference committee had to do was realize that if they allowed certain things, people would violate all of those federal statutes. Now, the respect for the rule of law is so important to me, and I don't know how you can expect me to be any kind of a lawyer, and I say not just you, but the people listening, without bringing this point up. And that brings together the contentious subject of federalism on this issue, sometimes referred to sovereignty, but I think more correctly, historically, is federalism. When the federal government has prohibited something and taken it away from the states when the citizens of those states clearly desire differently. And the adherence to the rule of law is important to me and should be to you, especially and if it's a law with which people may disagree. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that there are people who get a palliative effect from marijuana. There's equally no doubt in my mind there's no peer-reviewed literature that says it cures anything. But we know from the testimony in our hearing and our emails and our communities that there are people that get through their day a lot better because of this substance. This could have been an excellent opportunity for the states and the federal government to have some sort of dialogue about what to do about this substance. It has never occurred. What happened is in Montana, some assistant attorney general someplace sent out a memo that could be interpreted by thoughtful people as saying it was okay to do all those things that I just told you in the statutes that you absolutely cannot do. And so we have an explosion in this, and the citizens have demanded that we act. I will support this bill, first because it is a compromise, and because I voted for the Senate bill, and I realize there are a bunch of changes from the House and a conference committee, because the only way you can get a bill on a contentious topic is to compromise. I believe that there needs to be nationally a recognition about what to do. Either the federal government should file for injunctive relief and halt the operation of all the state marijuana laws, or the Congress should take action. But right now you have 15 states that authorize medical marijuana. And so in some of those states, doing what is a felony with much jail time is authorized, while in the neighboring state it's totally legal until the feds change administrations and they decide to prosecute everybody for everything. What a crazy system. But for me, to do what the voters sent us here to do, which I think clearly is to get a bill of some kind to clamp down on the large-scale grow operations and all the stuff that's going on. I won't go into that. It is absolutely essential that we compromise. We get the bill. I thank the conference committee. I know you all had a bunch of hard work, and I'm going to vote for the bill.
Senator Tutvedt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we kind of got to back up and remember why we're here. I'm going to talk about my daughter, who's a junior at Glacier High, and the fact that in the parking lot they're selling pot, and the policeman doesn't appear to be smart enough to look out the window and see where they're doing it in the parking lot. I want to talk about another friend of mine's daughter who goes to Bozeman High and talks about how marijuana is rampant in Bozeman High. I also want to talk about Whitefish High, where it's probably even worse than the other two. Marijuana is out of control. These kids that can get these green cards, they can have it. They can beat themselves back and get their card, and so there's no way for the police to come in and address this issue and take it off the streets and out of our schools. We've got these these cell operations right next to our schools. You hear about them in different places. I mean, let's remember why we're here. And also let's remember Dr. Kurth that came from the Pain Institute and talked about there's not one part of this that can't be derived out and given. And in medicine, they do predictable results, and they do consistent dosage to come out with a consistent. I mean, that's what we don't have here. You have an organic matter that's grown, and I know my wheat can grow from 8% protein to 16. So I'm sure the dosage of TCH, and it appears in this, so the dosage is all over. Dr. Kurth talked about, you're just going to give me a pile of herbs that nobody's checked, that has no results. I'm sure people have gotten it. But let's back up here. We've got to put this genie back in the bottle. We cannot have what's happening in our high schools go on. We've got to have this bill. We've got to have a bill. There may be some extreme cases, but we'll figure out how they can do it. Let's do it. Let's come back and remember our high school kids that are being dotted by this. And when they do, they take away their will to work, and they get that glaze in their eye, and they don't excel at sports. They don't excel at school, and they drop out. And that's our problem. Let's put this genie back in. Thank you.
Senator Caferro.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I wanted to talk a little bit about Senate Bill 23 and why it doesn't make sense. This bill disallows advertising and allows communities to disallow storefronts. And why this doesn't make sense is because a person providing cannabis can only provide cannabis for up to 3 people for free as a volunteer. So who would spend money advertising or building a storefront? Such provisions reveal how disconnected from reality this piece of legislation is. Second, Senate Bill 423 is riddled with absurd provisions. This bill says a provider may only grow or manufacture, as Senator Erickson brought up. So does that mean that a husband providing for a sick spouse is breaking the law if he were to provide an infused edible for a spouse who normally smoked? And it goes further to say that you cannot use the same equipment. You can only use equipment solely for the purpose of manufacturing of infused products. You can't use it for the usual household cooking. So what that means is, what this bill says, if I'm going to cook spaghetti for my kids and then later that night try to make butter for medicine for my spouse, I can't use the same product. And further, the state can come into your house and inspect to make sure you're doing this. It's just absurd, and it's not practical. It would be practical if we were using a commercial model, but this is a huge, it's a privacy issue. Third, Senate Bill 423 fails to clean up the program and instead gets rid of the professionalism and the quality. So Senator Tutvedt talked about consistent matter. This bill doesn't do anything to create consistent matter. And rather than cleaning up what was going on that wasn't safe or didn't work for communities, this bill eliminates those who were bringing quality and standards to the medical cannabis system. Professional grow facilities, labs, and sophisticated manufacturers are all eliminated. So the professionalism in the industry is eliminated. This bill is aimed at making it less legitimate and therefore less safe and less quality. It doesn't take the money out of the system, it just redistributes it. This bill doesn't take the money out of the system, it gives the money to someone else. At first, it gives the money to black market operators. In a couple of years, as more states allow medical cannabis, and when Montana gets over this hysteria, it gives the money to out-of-state businesses whose leaders allowed them to develop skills and professionalism. Representative Smith said on the House floor, this isn't the last we're going to see of this issue. We'll see it next session and the next, because more and more states are coming on board all the time. This means even the staunchest of advocates for repeal know that this is growing and maturing. It's not stopping. So why are we destroying Montana professionals and denying Montana patients over something even repealers recognize as growing and gaining legitimacy? Last, what I'll say is I sat on the interim committee that wrote the interim committee bill to regulate medical marijuana. And meeting after meeting, people in the industry and patients came to us and said, we want you to regulate this. How often do you have the industry come and say, we want regulation? The bill we have in front of us is not the interim committee bill. Be clear, it is not the interim committee bill. That's dead in the House. My other point is, I understand there's abuse and misuse of marijuana and prescription drugs and alcoholism. Those are two separate issues. And what I was hoping is that we would come out with a bill that made sure that the people who actually need the medicine get it and would cut down on the abuse and the misuse. This bill doesn't do it. The problem is not going to be corrected in the parking lots of the schools because of this bill. And last, where my heart is the most in this whole issue, because I'm torn too. I don't like drug abuse, and I'm very torn, and I see the effect that marijuana has on people who misuse it. I've seen lives destroyed because of it. But when my son was an infant 18 years ago, I used to drive cancer patients as a volunteer up to Great Falls for their treatment. And it just stuck in my mind how much they could be helped if they could just stop vomiting and keep food in their system and stay hydrated. For that reason, because this bill does not help patients, it hurts them, and it does not help an industry that we need to recognize as legitimate and valuable, I oppose the bill, or excuse me, the conference committee report. Thank you.
Senator Wittich.
Mr. Chairman, would Senator Larsen yield to a question?
Senator Larsen, will you yield?
Mr. Chairman, I do.
Senator Wittich.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Larsen, I also respect the hard work that everybody on the Senate committee and the House committee put on this, the probably hundreds of hours. And I also understand that these things are the result of compromise. My biggest concern, and I think it's been shared, is that we have to assume that people that will use this are sick and not healthy. And people who are sick probably are not, they are not in a good position to be growing marijuana. It's not as easy as it may seem to people. During the conference committee, was there a discussion, and I understand that the House is a little bit more, wanted this to be more stringent. The repeal bill was theirs. During the conference committee, was there discussion on the assumption that people that will be growing under this conference bill are sick and not capable of the same types of activities that healthy people would have?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Wittich, yes, we had those conversations a number of times. I think the understanding is, with the definition that's in this bill about disability that qualifies, very clearly talks about what you're inferring, that there are people, some of whom are not able to conduct their activities of daily living, that is, bathing and feeding themselves and so on. So yes, there would be people, there are people, to our knowledge, that we learned about, that cannot grow on their own. They do need help. They need the assistance to not only in the growing part, but in delivery and even in preparation in some instances. So there was a wide variety of issues that came before our committees about those subjects. So some people have intermittent problems, some people have constant problems that are very, very limiting. So we heard quite an array and saw a lot of testimony on that subject.
Can I have a follow-up, Mr. Chairman?
Will Senator continue to yield?
Mr. Chairman, I will.
Senator Wittich.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Larsen, you said that you would not support this compromise bill. And my question is, we currently have 30,000 approximately card holders. The rate of growth has been tremendous in the last few years. If you extrapolate that out in another 2 years, if we don't take any action this session, another 2 years it may be 40, 50, 60,000. We don't know. Is it your belief that if you don't support this bill, that the status quo that we currently have, the level of regulation or non-regulation that we currently have, is better than the terms of this conference bill?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Wittich, if I had that crystal ball, I'd be the most outstanding senator in this chamber. So I could predict all of our issues about money and social issues and so on. I can't say that that would happen because I believe, in listening to a lot of the testimony from law enforcement, is if this bill doesn't go through and become law, that there will be a different array in the community than we currently see. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Senator Brenden.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Senate, just a few days ago or a week or so ago in the papers we read where another 1,200 plus people got their medical marijuana cards in 1 month. That is nearly as many that have permanent medical marijuana cards in New Mexico. That's over twice as populated as the state of Montana. So you don't think something shouldn't be done? Is this Free Conference Committee report everything that I'd want? No, because I blasted the repeal bill out, which passed and the governor vetoed. But we've got to start someplace, and I agree with Senator Wittich. If we let this go any longer, we will have 50, 60, 70, 80,000 people on it. And boy, when I got home for Easter, did my people in my district from Malta to over to Plentywood let me know what they thought about it. And they said, we're sorry we voted for this bill when it passed in, what, 2003 or 4 or 5, whenever it was. We didn't think it would go that far. So we've got to get it under the control.
Senator Shockley.
Mr. Chairman, members of the body, first a confession. I helped write the opposition to the 2004 initiative for 2 reasons. Number one, I didn't think marijuana was good medicine. I'm putting that in quotes. And number 2, it was against the law. To be quite honest with you, I've come around to the opinion that for certain things it is the best medicine, but it's still against the law. I'm going to vote for this bill for essentially what Senator Jent said. It's the only game in town. The present situation is intolerable. It's totally out of control. It's this bill, which is not a great bill, or no bill. This is a hackneyed phrase we use all the time, but I truly commend Senator Esman. He did as good as he could. This is no commentary on Senator Esman. It's not a great bill, but it's much better than the present situation. So I'm going to vote for it. There's been some criticism, either implicit or explicit, that this is an initiative and we shouldn't change it. Well, I don't follow that logic at all. It's been around 6 years. It's legislation. We were elected to make laws and change laws. The fact that this was passed by an initiative and it's 6 years later, I don't think it's relevant that it's an initiative. If it was passed, say, in 2010 and we want to change it in 2011, well, I don't think that's good public policy. I think that's wrong. But 6 years later, I don't have any problem with changing the initiative. The people who voted for this, most of them, don't want the present situation. They were conned. There was a lot of out-of-state money that came here and misrepresented what it was for. What it was for a 75-year-old grandmother who was dying of breast cancer. What we got, now if you believe the papers, and I think this was accurately reported, one of the doctors who was giving out medical marijuana cards says that it was the best treatment for a sprained ankle. You know, we were conned. And it's this body's and the one across the restroom there to change bad laws regardless of how they were passed. So I suggest that we pass this. On balance, are some people not going to get treatment that need it? Yes. On the other hand, people that shouldn't be using it aren't going to get it. It's a balancing test, and I'm going to vote for it. I feel the balance is to vote for this.
Senator Vukovic.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take exception with a statement made by Senator Shockley that this is the only game in town. There is still another game in town, and that is a bill that is still sitting in the Judiciary Committee. Thank you.
Senator Gallus.
I'll be brief. I just want to talk a little bit about process moving forward. I'm in the last few days of my career here, and moving forward, for those of you who will get to come back to this body, I think it's important to know that I just feel that this issue should have been at minimum probably 4 or 5 bills. It's such a big thing to deal with. There's so many things in here that some of us like and some of us don't. And, you know, I started writing some of them down. So it deals with qualifications, ailments and diseases covered for eligibility, the length of eligibility before someone has to revisit a doctor, who's qualified, DUI offenders or parolees or under 18. And then it talks about supply. You know, I hate these storefronts, and I hate the advertising that goes on my main street in Butte. I just think it's gross. And that's in here, so that's one thing that I like, but there's so much that I don't. And it goes on and on and on. I'm not claiming that it's a violation of our Constitution in Article 5, number 3, but that's the single subject provision of our Constitution, and I just urge everyone moving forward, when issues like this that are this large and this omnibus come before the state, that maybe if you break things up into separate bills, it's a little bit it goes for better policy, and people can really vote for what they like and not have to group everything together like they do in the U.S. Congress. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion on the motion. Senator Mabry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to relate a comment that I heard at the Montana Loggers Association gathering that took place early in the session. It crystallized something for me, and maybe some of you have already heard this comment. Maybe it's come out in committee, and pardon me if I'm repeating something that's already come out. But Sherman Anderson, owner of Sun Mountain Logging, said, this is really disturbing me. The onus is on the employer now to do some drug testing. He said, I've had guys just simply turn in their hard hat and say, you're going to find traces of it on me. My wife has the card, and I'm getting a secondhand smoke. I realized then that a green card is sort of a family plan, that secondhand smoke affects others in the household. So when you say that 29,000 today, maybe 30,000 next month, I just want you to think that that probably has a multiplier effect on the people in the household. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion. Seeing none, would Senator Esmond care to close?
Members of the body, I want to thank you for good questions and highlighting the quandary that we're in today. You know, we don't get a maybe button on our desk. That was the first lesson that Senator Dan McGee gave me when I raised my hand and sat down next to him my first session in 2005. There's no maybe button. I wish there was a lot of times, and I'm sure you do too. What do the people of Montana want? We come here every day trying to figure that out and trying to respond to what we think they want. We hear from different people. We represent different communities. And, you know, so we bring different reflections to this floor. And somehow, in our collective wisdom, we get the job done and go home, and we come back again collectively as a body 2 years later to try to do our best job again. I don't think in 2004, when the people of Montana, 62% of them, that voted to pass that initiative, I don't think they were setting up an industry. The word industry doesn't appear in that bill. I don't think they were voting to set up storefronts and for marijuana to be bought and sold when they passed that initiative. Storefronts, dispensaries, buy and sell, none of those words appeared in that initiative. So here we are 7 years later, 6.5 years later, trying to figure out what did they mean then and what do they want now. I think they want, on balance, the product to be available for truly sick people, and I think this bill allows that to happen. The initiative allowed for caregivers. This compromise bill with the House allows providers. It doesn't allow buy and sell. It doesn't legitimize an industry. I don't think Montana voters voted to legalize. I've heard that term. You know, if somebody wants to legalize, they can put an initiative on the ballot to do that, but I don't think the people of Montana are ready for that. They voted to try to help a few really sick people. And it has come at a cost to our communities. And as Senator Tutvedt said so well, the children in our communities. This bill repeals a very important part of the initiative that was passed, and that's 50-46-206, and that's the affirmative defense provision. And that's the provision that has created this problem in the high school parking lots, because it basically says anybody can make a claim that they might be able to get a card, and that has tied the hands of law enforcement. This bill provides that a truly sick person gets a laminated card. They've got to have it on their possession, and it allows law enforcement to do an appropriate action that they are charged with in the state of Montana, and that is protect our youth from what is still a controlled substance under federal law. And that page 2 of that bill that came out of the state of Washington, I mean, if you read it like I did as a commercial landlord, I mean, there is language in that letter that frankly just made my blood run cold. I don't have any tenants that are engaged in this activity. But here, the following sentence appears in this letter. Others who knowingly facilitate the actions of the licensees, which the Washington legislation set up, including property owners, landlords, and financiers, should also know that their conduct violates federal law. And so we have a very carefully crafted, to the best of our ability, compromise bill with the House that tries to take care of truly sick people, allows people that wish to help them, takes the profit out of the situation, because I don't think profit was in the initiative either, and gives law enforcement tools so this state can go forward for the next 2 years and try to get this situation under control. I hope you'll give it a yes vote. Thank you very much.
The question now arises on the motion of Senator Esmond that when this committee does rise and report after having had under consideration the free conference report for Senate Bill 423, they recommend concurrence in the same. As many are in favor of the motion signify by voting aye. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Senator Van, do you member wish to change his or her vote? Clerk will record the vote.
Mr. Chairman, 34 senators have voted aye. 16 senators have voted no.
With 34 senators having voted aye and 16 having voted no, the Free Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 423 has passed second reading. Senator Esmond.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee does